Hello and welcome to episode 29, I believe, of the Horsemen Podcast. And I am not alone, of course. Levi, Thrash Maniac, is back right above me. Oh, Lord. He's gonna kill me yet again. I can feel it. Artur Castanha. Okay, Keith Lee. Right next to him is our favorite woman from Germany, Hannah Klein.
I'm not dead yet. I'm alive. I'm still alive.
And then underneath her is, of course, Horror Master Ricky. Nice bow. And yes,
I was trying to do like the Joker dance, but I'm like, I can't. I'm in a car.
So yes, it is Horsemen Podcast time yet again. This time we're talking top 10 concept albums. Oh boy, what an episode this is going to be. So, little note with concept albums. So, concept albums have been a thing in the world of rock and metal ever since the late 60s, early 70s time period. Mostly from prog rock. But then over the years, other styles of rock and metal have embraced the idea of doing concept albums. You even have death metal concept albums. You have maybe black metal concept albums, some doom concepts, even maybe a metalcore concept album if you're lucky, if that's your jam. Basically, concept albums are embraced by all forms of rock and metal. It's not limited to just progressive rock and progressive metal. Needless to say, power metal is often synonymous with the concept album format too.
And symphonic metal.
Yeah, and symphonic metal, even folk metal to that degree as well. But we are here to discuss our favorites of the concept album format, and some choices we may have might be controversial, others not so much and more obvious. But I figured to get things started, let's get started with how we feel about concept albums. Like, what concepts do we like hearing in albums whenever they're considered concept albums? For me, it really doesn't matter what the story's about, as long as the story is well written and it's good. That's all that matters to me. You could write a story about a terrible life and having a rough love life, only to find out that your love has been killed, and then you go on a killing spree. That could be cool for me. Or even like concepts based off of books and films, as if it complements the film and the book. That's another good thing for me. Or if you want to just create a crazy story off of your crazy, twisted, sadistic mind, and it works out well and it makes sense, then you get my vote. So basically, yeah, spoilers for some albums maybe. But that's how I feel about concept albums. We don't get very many of them, as far as like in a band's discography, unless you're King Diamond. So, which might be a spoiler, but nonetheless, that's how I feel with concept albums.
Or Alice Cooper.
So, Ricky, what are your opinions on concept albums? What concepts do you like to see within a concept album?
I mostly like concept albums that talk about a story, like a historical thing that happened. Like, for example, Sabaton has a lot of World War II albums. And the most recent one, The Great War, is all about World War One. I very much enjoy that because sometimes I'm able to get the reference, because there's some albums that do some references you're like, why? I don't understand this reference, but once you know the story behind the album, you're like, oh, that's why. Also, albums that kind of describe today's view on life. It could be tragic, it could be romantic, and also stories that just don't make sense, like something like you said, Levi, that pops out of your mind. As long as it's good, catch your ribs, gets me entertained, it's all good for me.
Hannah?
Well, I personally like it when the music of concept albums floats like it's a whole entity. So when the tracks drift into each other the next, then or if it's just one whole long song, I really like that. And regarding the topics, I like it when they talk about historical events and or book adaptations or in general adapt some lyrical works. But I also enjoy it when they're about something futuristic or something like that. So as long as it makes sense, I'm fine with it. And sometimes I don't care about the topics, and I simply enjoy the music. So, it depends on if I am really getting into the lyrics with the band, and if I'm that much interested into it. That's probably one of the things, especially if English isn't your first language. I personally mostly care about the music and not so much about the lyrics. But if the music is really good, I will. It is more likely that I will look into the lyrics of the songs, and well, yeah.
Artur?
Just like Hannah, if the concept is good, I will listen. It doesn't matter which one it is. It could be historical themes. It could be something conjure up on someone's mind. The music itself needs to be a concept as well. If the music does not mixes in with the story, I don't see a great concept album. I just see something that has a good idea, but it should be a whole lot more. As for favorite subjects, I don't care. As long as the concept is good, it could be about war, it could be a horror story, it could be something fantastic. Even Queen had a song that Freddie Mercury conjured up called The Seven Seas of Rye, which was something that he invented for a concept album that he was doing on the world of Rye. So if Queen still has songs that can be concept albums, and if the musicians are good or great, then I don't care.
Well, I guess that settles that little conundrum. But now, time for the list, starting with honorable mentions. I have 3 honorable mentions that I came up with off the top of my head. First, Artur might kill me for this, but I got Blind Guardian, Nightfall, and Middle-earth. I knew that was coming.
He forgot about it.
Oh, I thought it'd be on his list.
Are you serious? You're starting to kill me with honorable mentions? You mean this Nightfall in Middle-earth?
Yeah. Don't tell me it's your
then
number
I'll
one.
just spoil it.
Number 2. Oh, it's close.
No, but still. You're starting to murder me already.
I guess I haven't gotten my bloodlust fulfilled yet, I guess. But yeah, I picked Nightfall and Middle-earth because, not a big fan of Tolkien stuff, even though I like the Hobbit movies and some of Lord of the Rings, and this is basically right up my alley in that sense. After all, a story about the Silmarillion, it's a pretty cool concept to write an album based on. Plus, I love the song Mirror, Mirror. It's such an iconic power metal classic. The next honorable mention, Nocturnus the Key. Nocturnus' debut from 1990, and progressive death metal before it was even called progressive death metal, with a little technicality thrown into the mix. Plus, the story is really interesting, a story about an android traveling back to the past to stop Christianity. Basically, a cult-themed sci-fi concept. After all, the album cover has an android with, a beaming light of a pentagram on it. Plus, this album, musically, it gives me vibes of, Morbid Angel and Early Death, which is pretty cool.
In a way similar to... Sorry. I
think Artur's lagging a bit. Uh-oh, Artur's the lagger now.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, great. Again, the show would be nothing without technical difficulties. Damn it, Vince McMahon, damn it.
Oh, Jesus.
But anyways, moving on.
What I was saying just a few moments ago is that concept is similar to Wasp's The Neon God.
And then my last honorable mention, I may kill Artur again. I got Fear Factory Obsolete. Oh, it's not on your list.
Safe.
No.
Nope.
And if I had to choose a Fear Factory album, which I did not, I would most likely choose Demanufacture, because every time I hear Demanufacture, despite the fact that they may not know, I almost envision a full Terminator movie. Like a Terminator, an extreme version of Terminator, something more rated R for the Terminator series.
But yeah, I went with Obsolete because it seemed like it was an actual concept album, whereas Demanufacture maybe loosely a little bit, like conceptual but not a straight up concept. Hence why I could have put Avenged Sevenfold The Stage on my honorable mentions, but they don't even call it a concept album, it's just conceptual, but there's not like one driving theme throughout the whole album, so that's why I left that album off. But Obsolete, I went with it because, of course, it's their biggest album, but it's also the one concept album in their catalog. And I know our good buddy, Dylan, Kamikaze Games, would be over the moon on this, because he loves Fear Factory. But, yeah, Obsolete being a story about robots in the future causing chaos as man tries to return the world to normal only to fail. Basically another Terminator movie, but only this time the robots win! So,
The Terminator, they also won.
well,
Kind of.
I don't know. But anyway, so those are my 3 honorable mentions.
This in future time, they won. In past time, not yet.
So those are my honorable mentions. Hannah, your honorable mentions.
Well, much like you, I've also got Nightfall in Middle Earth by Blind Guardian. I mean, it's quite ambitious, trying to adapt such a large literary work as the Silmarillion, and I think they've done quite a good job. And like you said before, Mirror Mirror is an awesome song, and so on. I mean, musically, this album is awesome, but the thing is, Blind Guardian has never been amongst my personal favorites. I mean, I enjoy listening to a few songs of them once in a while, but I mean, power metal has never been one of my favorite genres.
Same here.
Then the next, the next one, Insomnium, Winter's Gate, awesome concept album. I love how the music floats on this album, how these different parts actually create this one unity, and then they tell the story of those Vikings on a voyage, as far as I remember. And I mean, it's a great concept, and the music here is flawless. Love it. That's why it's here. Then the next one, Ulva, themes from William Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Awesome adaptation of this kind of epic work of William Blake. I mean, I've always been a fan of William Blake, be it his writings and be it his paintings. I think he is an awesome artist, and what Ulver have done on this album is awesome. I mean, it's the first album to deviate from the black metal past. I mean, if you exclude Quelitsaga, this folk album, the second album they've released, and it's very progressive. It's weird, experimental, features awesome guest appearances by Ishan and so Fenrir. Amazing album, amazing concept. Then the next one, Green Carnation, Light of Day, Day of Darkness. One hell of a song. discovered this first because of Cover Killer Nation. I think it's epic, and as far as I remember, the main songwriter tries to deal with the death of his daughter and the birth of his son, and it's really tragic. And well, yeah. And then my last honorable mention, both albums by Christoph Bartuschka. I think both of them follow a concept. The first follows the concept of an Orthodox mass, and the second one the burial ceremony within the Orthodox Church, and it's a lot darker than the first album, and it's just everything fits together so well. I mean, you've got the music, you've got the vocals, and I mean, I of course do not speak Russian or whatever language they're singing here, but I mean, just this kind of atmosphere this album these both albums create are awesome. And I think the concept on both albums, or the concept of the band as an entirety, is awesome.
Yeah. Ricky.
I got 6 honorable mentions. First of all, I got Mastodon's Leviathan. A little known album, talk about a book that not a lot of us have read about. A little called Moby Dick, which has probably one of my favorite songs, Blood and Thunder. And I think I just killed Levi already. Oh, number 8. Oh shit, I forgot to do it. Next up,
Levi. That's my number 8 too.
Damn you, Ricky.
But I actually put 2 Mastodon albums there.
Next up, Nocturnus the Key. Levi already said it perfectly. Great progressive death metal concept album about a robot going back in time to stop Christianity. Goes better my book. Next up, Dream Theater Metropolis Part 2. I was never a Dream... I just kept on leaving Artur again! I was never a big fan of Dream Theater, but I cannot deny the greatness of this album. It's probably their best album next to... Shit, I'm trying to
Images and Words?
Probably, yeah. I'm blanking
Images?
out already. Yeah, next to Images and Words. Next up, Opeth, My Arms, Your Horse. I almost tempted in putting it in my list.
I think I also have an Opeth album there, and I'm sure it's the same one as Levi.
Yeah. It's pretty obvious which one it is. But, like I said, this album I mentioned when we did the progressive metal album, this is my favorite Opeth album. Because I like it how at the very end of each song, it goes on to the next song. And
with the last line in the lyrics being the title of the next song.
Yeah. I think it's kind of genius. And also Michael Lagerfeld, great vocalist. What more can I say about Michael? Next up, Rush 2112. A big pioneer of... If you talk about concept albums, I'm bringing the mother of all concept album. Or maybe the father of all concept album.
You want a hint as to where it's on my list? Here's your hint. You bastard! And just to copy you. Damn you!
Sorry.
Now do more Vince McMahon.
So wait. You mean this 2112? You mean this 2112?
Yes, that 2112.
Oh!
And last but not least, X Japan's Art of Life. A 30-minute masterpiece talking about a guy wanting to commit suicide, but he doesn't thanks to love. Love's the one thing that bonds him to keep going in life. And that's all he has ever wanted in life, just to be loved. That's it.
Now that my heart's been ripped out of my body yet again by Ricky. Artur.
You nearly ripped mine, but I'm sure that someone will rip mine in a moment. But nevertheless, I also have 7 honorable mentions. One of them is part of my shirt. I have Ice Dirt, The Glorious Burden. I mean, talking about the American Revolution, and later on with Gettysburg, with the Civil War, it's definitely one of the best. I have King Crimson's Islands, mostly because King Crimson is one of the fathers of progressive rock. I also have Rush's 2112, but they barely made the list. I also have Irion's 01, 01011 and so on. That whole concept of Arjen Lucassen talking about technology and stuff, and with some great guests as well, makes it for a great album. I have Gojira's From Mars to Sirius.
Forgot about Gojira.
Honorable mention?
Honorable mention as well.
I have Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare.
Forgot about that! Another honorable mention.
And this one might shock some people. I think it's my 7th. Pink Floyd's The Wall. I didn't put it in my list, but you
guys are killing me today.
Artur, you mean
You're going to kill me in a moment. I'm sure.
You mean this wall? This?
That wall. I'm sure that you're going to kill me all in a moment. I'm sure of it, but those are my honorable mentions. And barely, Rush and Pink Floyd didn't make my list. But when I was deciding to do my list, I wanted to go full metal. I did not want to go too prog nor too rock. So I wanted to go full metal.
Well, there's our honorable mentions, as already, 4 of the albums on my list have been spoiled. I guess I'll begin at number 10 with Dream Theater Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. I mean, as Ricky pointed out...
It's my number 6. It's my number 6.
Number 4. Oh boy, Ricky, what have you started? Anyways, so as Ricky brought up, it's arguably Dream Theater's best work they've ever done. After all, the story about a man named Nicholas going through past life regression therapy goes into a hypnotic state of seeing a woman and her lover, Julian, who has a gambling and cocaine addiction, who ends up committing a murder-suicide, all ending with Julian's brother Edward being reincarnated and killing Nicholas. Basically, it's all over the place, the story, and it's, and who would have thought that this album was spawned from a song off of Images and Words called Metropolis Part 1, which is a great song off of that. Nobody would have thought it would spawn, arguably, the band's best album in '99. And
still to this day, I remember the last time I saw Dream Theater here in Portugal, when they played The Spirit Carries On, there was no dry eyes. At least within my friends, there was no dry eyes on that song.
So that's my number 10. Ricky.
My número 10 is an album that I almost didn't put it, but as I listened to it more, I was like, yeah, this belongs to the concept list. The Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And an album that the Beatles, after the success of, I think it was Revolver, they wanted to do something different. So they decided to have alter egos of themselves and create this Sgt. Pepper's Band. And I mean, this album, one of the most psychedelic yet important albums of the 60s. I mean, when you got songs like Losing the Sky by Diamonds, which for many years thought it was about LSD, which I think it was 10 years ago, Paul McCartney confirmed that John Lennon wrote it while doing LSD, which I'm like, that's hardcore shit. But also you got songs like With You, Without You, a song that George Harrison sings, which is rare for George to sing sometimes. Also, with a little help from my friends. I mean, come on, you used to get Ringo playing on the song. Rarely he sings a lot. A Day in the Life, probably one of my favorite Beatles songs. And how could you forget the iconic Getting Better?
I forgot also to name an artist that should also be here that I forgot, but I can say it right now. David Bowie as Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, the song "Getting Better," who got a lot of popularity in the movie The Cat in the Hat after some band made a cover of it, which it's not good as the original. But also the album coming. Come on, you got iconic figures. You got right here Charlie Chaplin. You got here Marlon Brando. You got Bob Dylan. You got Edgar Allan Poe. You got I think Muhammad Ali. And it's a good little album to listen to when you're bored, or in some cases when you're stoned as fuck, because I've heard people listen to this when they're really high. I've never done that, probably never will, but still, go listen to it.
Hannah.
My number 10 might be a bit of an odd choice, but I really felt that I had to include it, and it's the Maldoror Chant's Hermaphrodite by Shamash. I mean, it's probably a very typical choice for me, but I mean, it's a really nice little ambient black metal EP that basically adapts a whole chapter by Lautremont's The Maldoror Chants, and talks about the story of the poor hermaphrodite who is cast out of society, humiliated, yet at some point also desired by people, but can never be close to anybody because nobody will ever understand him, because he's so different, and he dreams of death and salvation, but isn't getting it, and has to remain within society, but kind of shunned away and hidden away from society. And it's, I mean, the thing about this EP is I even bought the book, the Maldoror Chants, and you can really read along to the music. I mean, it's a one-on-one adaptation of Lautremont's original writing, and the way the music evolves throughout this album. I mean, it's barely even music; it's more like noise at some point, but still fitting. I mean, it took me quite a few listens getting used to this album, but nowadays, I mean, you have to listen to it from front to back, from the first note to the last note, and then you can experience this kind of crescendo that follows throughout the plot of that. It's kind of reflected throughout the music and the plot of this story, and it's really tragic if you take some time and listen to it. But it's not something that you can listen to on the go. It's hard music to digest, but I mean, so worth it once you break through it. And I think the concept is amazing, and Shamash promised that this is the first out of many EPs that adapt parts of the Maldoror Chants, and I'm really looking forward to what they will release next, especially in connection to this work. And I love it. It's awesome. A lot of people don't get it. I can get that as well, but I really like the concept of this album.
Artur?
My number 10, and Ricky might be a bit shocked by it, is Orphaned Lands, Mabul, the story of the three sons of Seven.
Oh shit! Forgot that.
I mean, the story talking about the angels that represent all the religions, that they were given representation with all their symbols, but then because they wanted to convince humanity to stop their sins, they were not allowed back in heaven. I mean, the story is basically what religion in a way should have been. It's not what we know today as religion, but it's what it should have been. And also, this album was also produced by sorry by Yossi Sassi, the now departed guitarist of the band. And you still find a lot of jams around here that are still played on their shows to this day, like Ocean Land, Kiss of Babylon, Acai, even Nora El Nora, which always they end the shows with it, along with the last part of Ornaments of Gold. But despite the theme not being for me, for all the religion stuff and such, but as a concept album, I can see it as a very good concept album, and that's why it's my number.
Well, while we're on you, Artur, time for your number 9. 9.
Interesting that you should say that, because this is my number 9. It's The Great War by Sabaton. I mean, yeah, as Ricky said once, there have been so many Sabaton albums that always played the Second World War. But it's very rare that you would find themes that speak about the First World War. Until last year, July's last year, with Sabaton's The Great War. I mean, songs like The Future of Warfare, The Fields of Verdun, which became one of their singles, The Great War itself. Personally, one of my favorite songs, The Red Baron, talking about Manfred von Richthofen, the Roten Baron, as he is called, and as one of the the ace of aces of the Air Force. Still, his record hasn't been beaten to this day. All of it, ending with In the Flanders Field, which is a poem by a British poet named John Macri. And you have possibly right here, if you want to teach in a way First World War in schools, this is a great album to do so. The Great War, my number 9.
Hannah.
My number 9, well, it's Iron Maiden's Seventh Son of a Seventh Son.
My number 4.
I was sure that it would be a lot higher in your list.
I never considered Seventh Son of a Seventh Son a concept album. I never considered that.
Well, if there's one concept, or if there might be one concept album in Maiden's discography, it probably is this one. I mean, there are other Maiden albums I prefer over this one, but I still think it's a great album with songs like The Evil That Men Do, Moonchild, Can I Play With Madness, the title track, and I think it's the concept. If there is a concept with the adaptation of the same book about seventh son of a seventh son possessing great powers and whatever. I mean, it's a great idea to adopt a novel into an album, and I think it's a very risky, or it was a very risky move for Maiden at that time, because they were at the height of their career. I mean, most, especially at least for me, the best Maiden albums out of their career were released in the 80s, and releasing such an album at that time, quite risky, but they still did it, and I think they deserve a lot of respect for that. And I think musically this one is great, so well, that's why it's on number 9. 9.
My number 9, I don't know if anybody else has it on their list, but I wanted to give it some love. Judas Priest, Nostradamus.
Number 1?
5.
Oh.
Damn it, I forgot Nostradamus, and I love that album. Damn it. Or as Vince McMahon say, I love that album. Damn it.
Oh, my hands hurt. Oh, that hurt.
Yeah, I'd say smashing your
hospital.
damn camera. But I went with Nostradamus because I feel out of the entire Judas Priest discography, this is the one that needs more appreciation. Yeah, it was long and there were some filler songs, but as a concept and the mood behind it was fantastic. Even if the production maybe not the best production, but there are quite a few songs off of this album that are among my favorite Judas Priest songs, like the song Death, which is basically doom metal Judas Priest, which is quite interesting. Even other songs like Pestilence and Plague. Yeah, Conquest is a good one. Future of Mankind, the final track, being so epic.
The Horsemen.
Four Horsemen War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically
Prophecy.
just orchestral and drums. Yeah, The Prophecy is a good one. Revelations. I mean, there are a ton of great songs on this album. And even like the quick transitionary songs flow the album together quite nicely. So... And also the title of the album, Nostradamus, it's self-explanatory as to what the story is. Even the album cover is quite interesting. Hell, as far as I hear with the deluxe version, it's like this massive packaging, which I'd like to get someday because it looks badass. So, that's my number 9. Ricky.
My number 99999. Edge of Sanity, Crimson. That's why I didn't bring it up, because I knew it was going to get you back right away.
I did not hear.
Edge of Sanity, Crimson.
Ooh!
Ah!
A little taste of your own medicine. Thanks to you, Levi, I was able to discover Edge of Sanity, and I was able to listen to this album. A post-apocalyptic world where the king and queen of Earth give birth to a child who, unfortunately, the queen passes away. In a world that humanity cannot breed children, so the population is going down. And then you have the king taking care of the princess until the king suddenly passes away, and there's nobody to take the throne. So the townspeople of this earth take the throne for themselves and leave the princess out of the throne, and she just walks around and meets a very dark figure that convinces her to take the throne and take over the world. And everyone thinks, oh, she's gonna take the throne. We can start breathing truth again. Nope, totally the opposite. She goes out of control. She does the almost like Elizabeth Bathory, but not really Elizabeth Bathory. And the townspeople are tired of it, so I think they capture her in one of those. I don't know what they capture her, but they seal her away for eternity, so no one can resurrect her again or get her out of his cave or prison. And I mean, Dan Swano, Mike Rockerfeld. I mean, what more can I say about those two guys? The match made in heaven or hell. Yeah, I mean, even the song as a whole. I mean, even if you didn't know the concept of the album, it's still a great song to listen to. And again, thanks to you, Levi. And that's why I didn't forget when you mentioned Nostradamus, because I knew it was going to get you back right away.
Hannah?
My number 9. I already said mine.
Oh. I meant. Yeah. Damn you, Ricky! You've messed my brain up. You've killed me 5 times this episode.
Hey, this is what you get for what you did with the Satanist. I'm paying.
Hey, I got back at you for killing us all with Opeth.
I'm gonna get Artur later on because
Okay.
There's one album I know he has a number one, and I'm gonna get it from later.
All right, Ricky. We'll start with you at wait for it. Number 8.
My number 8, Queensryche Operation Mindcrime.
Seven.
Wait, 8, 7, 6, and
6.
What was your Levi? Ah, man, just by one more digit. We have the protagonist Nikki, who wakes up from a coma, who can't remember his mind, and starts to remember his memory that he was brainwashed by a figure called Dr. X, who realizes he's also a drug addict and convinces him to join his cult in exchange for drugs. And every time he says the Operation Mindcrime, he goes into zombie mode and just killings and all that until he meets a nun by the name of Mary and falls in love with her and wants to get out of this cult. And when he gets out of this cult, there's a consequence. The head of this occult sends people to kill her, which blames him on Nikki, so he's locked in an institution at the very end, and he just looks at a very mirror and just realizes what he has become. But that story is dark. I mean, being brainwashed, but being a drug addict, but falling in love and want to change everything, but your past comes back to haunt you. It's a very dark and romantic Romeo and Juliet-ish story. And also the songs, they're also great. The title track, Revolution X, I Don't Believe in Love.
Eyes of a Stranger.
Eyes of a Stranger, the closing track, probably one of the best closing tracks I've ever heard in a while. Great album.
Well, my so my number 8 has been spoiled. Mastodon Leviathan. So, of course, the concept
It's
about...
part of my number 8 as well, but I added another one.
And I think I know which one. But yeah, concept album about Moby Dick. Concept album about Moby Dick, and also some of Mastodon's best songs, Blood and Thunder. I was always a fan of Sea Beast, Iron Tusk, Aqua Dementia, Hearts Alive. They're one of their first long songs they ever did at nearly 14 minutes. Kind of helped set the standard for Mastodon albums to come shortly after with the following 2. And I know one of those 2 must be on Artur's number 8, and I will let you go ahead and say it, since it's your turn.
Blood Mountain.
Oh, I thought you were going to go Crack the Sky.
Yeah, I thought Crack the Sky too.
No, because out of all the trilogy that Mastodon did, Leviathan is, of course, also in my number 8, the concept album of Moby Dick. But Blood Mountain, it is also a bit of a concept album, because what they created was like these 4 elements combined all together. Being Leviathan representative of the water, Blood Mountain represents the earth. As I'm seeing here on interviews, Troy Sanders called it about climbing the mountain, the difficulty that it gets to reach the top, especially the higher you get even more hallucinations. You start to see strange creatures and such. And with titles such as Hunters of the Sky, which is personally my favorite track of that album, Circle of Sisquatch, which entitles someone seeing a Sasquatch, Colony of Berkman, The Crystal Skull, and the other 2 that, in a way, are both number 2 and number 3 on my best songs of this album, Sleeping Giant and The Wolf is Loose. It is for me, Blood Mountain represents the peak of what Mastodon was. I mean, Crack the Sky is also very good. I'm not ashamed, but the rest, The Hunt, I had the trouble getting afterwards to Mastodon. Never liked Hunter. Once More Around the Sun. It was only afterwards with Empire of the Sun that I got back. But my number 8s are Leviathan and Blood Mountain. And if you don't mind, I'll skip already to my number 7, which has been spoiled by Ricky. It's Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche. And what more needs to be said? Ricky has said everything.
Hannah, you're number 8 and number 7.
My number 8 might be a bit of a weird choice.
Meh.
It's Blood Wolves, The Blazing Gospel of Heinrich Kramer by The Ruins of Beverest. And this album, I mean, I've talked about them quite a lot. This is probably one of their doomiest albums so far. And what they do on this album is they include passages of The Hammer of the Witches, Hexenhammer in German, written by Heinrich Kramer somewhere in the 14th, 15th century, at the height of the German witch hunt. I mean, it was what was published somewhere around 1450, 1480, something around that time, and it includes some very weird stuff about how to identify and how to punish and how to exterminate witches, and it was a very widespread book here in Germany, and lots of witches or women were killed because of it, even though it was opposed by the theological faculty of the University of Cologne, close to where I live, which at that point in time was like the one of the most important faculties of theological studies here in Germany. And I mean, up to this date, this book is still widely discussed here, especially in religious circles. And this album by The Ruins of Beverest includes direct quotations in Latin from the Hammer of the Witches, as well as passages told out of Heinrich Kramer's perspective about the witch hunt here. And it's, I mean, if you read the lyrics, they're very, very, very dark, and the music accentuates this kind of darkness in the lyrics because it's very bleak and very nihilistic, and I mean, I love these kind of dark moods, and I think this album creates this kind of mood perfectly, and it's a very interesting concept, in my opinion.
Your number 7?
Well, my number 7 heads in a total direction, less depressive, more artistic. It's David Bowie's The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders of Mars.
Honorable mention.
I mean, David Bowie, in my opinion, is a very interesting artistic figure. I mean, he has managed to get in and out of roles throughout his entire career, and on this album, what he does with this whole Ziggy Stardust persona, I think it's brilliant. The concept is brilliant, especially for that time. And the music is very proggy, hard rockish. I really love it, and there are awesome songs on here, and the whole concept of this album was so well ahead of its time, and in my opinion, it's the best Bowie record ever, and I love it to death. And well, there's a starman in the sky. So
Artur.
He already said his number 7.
Oh yeah, he already said his number 7.
I already said Mindcrime.
Yeah. Ricky.
My number 7, bit of an odd one. Marilyn Manson, Antichrist Superstar.
Forgot about that one.
A little album created in...
Marilyn Manson's Antichrist?
Yeah?
Interesting.
A little album created in 1996 about what would happen if a famous person would get into politics and become the leader of the world, which sounds familiar in today's society. Not gonna mention more about it.
Trump.
Yeah, basically. So
Make
this was
America great again.
Anyways,
Anyways, also this album not only represents that, but also represents Manson's growth when he was in a very strict religious school when he grew up. That he said that the school will always tell him the rock and metal are Satan, are for Satanists. And this album describes of what the idea of them being Manson wanted to be instead of it's the idea of what Manson didn't want to be because of the religious beliefs that the school implemented into him in school. Not only that, but you got the song The Beautiful People. His best song ever created, an anthem of the 90s. You got also Sacred Wings, the title track, Antichrist Superstar, the song that started the song, Relation Anthem, probably one of the most weirdest songs ever started an album when they start about like a mass and you just hear Manson just screaming, fire! Fire! Like almost wanting to suffocate himself to death. I mean, it's Manson. He, as crazy as he is, you gotta respect the living crap out of Manson for what created in the 90s, which also Trent Reznor produced this album. I mean, you want to think about Trent Reznor that we haven't said before. And that's it.
oh boy. My number 7. Abigail by King Diamond.
That's my number 6.
Oh. Uh-oh.
Ah, it's number one.
Yes! 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 I knew it!
It's my number one.
I knew it!
Oh, shit.
Wait, Artur, you mean that?
This, Abigail. This. 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 Levi has killed me again.
That's tame compared to what Ricky's been doing to me this whole show. But anyway, so of course we all love King Diamond. He's arguably one of the all-time greatest vocalists in the history of metal, and second solo album after the downfall of Merciful Fate. We get a concept album, Abigail, a story about a young couple moving into a mansion in 1845, with many horrific moments in it, such as caskets, ghosts, possessions, pregnancy, and death. All top to bottom with this album. And of course, who doesn't love the title track of this album? It's one of the most iconic King Diamond songs of all time. I would try and sing a bit of it, but I don't want to scare the living hell out of my lungs. So that's my number 7. I'll quickly go ahead and say my number 6, which is Queensryche Operation Mindcrime. Enough said. Ricky, your number 6.
My number 6, King Diamond, Abigail. You said it perfectly. Enough said.
Hannah.
My number 6 is Queensryche Operation Mindcrime, and I think Ricky has already summoned it perfectly.
Artur.
Now that... No, it's okay. Now that we have all killed each other, so to say, my number 6 is Metropolis Part 2 by Dream Theater. I mean, I've been a fan of Dream Theater for some time now. Although my favorite albums are both Images and Words and what was it? Octavarium. Metropolis, it is by itself a whole concept, talking about life that feels strangely familiar by the girl Victoria Payne, the tragedies that eventually take place, the therapist that eventually hears the pleas of Victoria to bring back her memories, which is translated in possibly one of the best songs that Dream Theater has ever played, The Spirit Carries On. but Metropolis is without question, I would say, Dream Theater at its peak. I know that eventually went to Octavarium, Systematic Chaos. A dramatic turn of events is now one of my favorites as well, despite being the first album not to feature longtime drummer and beast on the drum kit Mike Portnoy, but still, all the concept of all the story behind Metropolis is excellent, and the music that is attached to it even more perfect. So, number 6, Metropolis Part 2.
Real quick to show off my copy of Leviathan. I got the full cover with the whole whale. Alright, Artur, you're number 5.
Oh boy, I'm gonna kill Levi now again. It's the Opeth album, Still Life. It's Still Life. Yeah, I killed him again. I mean, the entire concept of Still Life, we're talking about this character, which one could say it's Melinda, being banished from the city because she did not believe the religion that was practiced there, and then all the twists and turns to get her to bring back. But when she comes back, but when he comes back, it's not Melinda, unfortunately. He becomes a bit this sort of a devil's advocate, which eventually leads him to his execution. But you have the songs that also that also tell you the whole story of Still Life. The More, Benighted, Face of Melinda, Serenity, Painted Death. I mean, the entire album is possibly one of the best this is saying a lot, because after Still Life came what is regarded as Opeth's best, like Blackwater Park and Deliverance. But I strongly believe that Still Life can hang on with all those. And not only that, this is actually the first album that Opeth went from the death metal phase to the more progressive phase. And that's why it is my number 5, the Still Life.
Well, Ricky killed me with this. However, I have both albums at number 5, Crimson and Crimson 2. Because when it comes to making sequels to concept albums, there's none better than Crimson 2. Fuck Operation Mindcrime 2, that album sucked.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, these two, I mean, with both following the same story about Earth losing their ability to breed, and then a king and queen have a child, and only for the princess to be locked in a tank with crimson fluid and forced to sleep for all eternity. I mean, both 40-plus minute songs, and of course, with Crimson 1, you had Michael from Opeth doing some guitar and vocal stuff. And like I brought up before in many episodes in the past, around the 32 to 33 minute mark, you get this wonderful hypnotic melodic duet with Swano and Ackerfeld that's just psychedelic and amazing. And then with Crimson 2, which is slightly different from Crimson 1, where Dan only contributes clean vocals. He doesn't do the growls. Instead, it's Roger Johansson from Rib Spreader doing the growls on the album. And also you had Mike Weed from many bands like King Diamond, The Haunted, Candlemass on guitar as well. But Swano doing guitars, bass, drums, keyboards, clean vocals, the production. And not to mention, this album was dedicated to Chuck from Death, and which is a fitting tribute. And this to me sounds like if Dream Theater went death metal, because of the keyboard aspect sounding a lot like Dream Theater. But and unlike Crimson 1, this is separated into 9 separate movements. At the time with this album, if you try to put on like Windows Media Player, it's like 60 plus songs, because they tried to battle the whole music piracy going around at the time in 2003. But now with iTunes, you could just mash them all up into one file, which is actually what I did, so that way you could have the whole song together, so it'd feel more complete. And, I mean, what can you say? And this was the last Edge of Sanity album ever created 17 years ago, and I would hope that Swano and Andreas Axelsson, formerly of also Marduk, and now in Dysphere, a crust punk band with members of At the Gates, hopefully they can come back together, reunite, get some new members, and create Crimson 3, because I think that would be quite the undertaking. But, yeah.
I will full on support that as well. Crimson 3. Please,
yeah.
Dan Swano, if you listen to this, please give us Crimson 3.
Or give us a follow-up from the last Witherscape album, because I love that album. And one last note, both albums released on Corthon's label Black Mark Productions. So, a little kinship with Bathory. Alright, Ricky, you're number 5.
Well, you killed me with my number 5, because my number 5 is Judas Priest Nostradamus. For centuries, many people, when they hear the word Nostradamus, they think of this unknown seen man with magical abilities that could see the future. Judas Priest did something different. They took the man outside the legend. They made him into a normal human being that also feels emotions, also feels love, also has fear, also has hatred. They made him more humanized, and also tell the story of how the normal human being would transit into one of the most iconic prophets ever, knowing all the prophecies he has created over the years. Some of them have come true, others are in question, but besides that, the album is great from top to bottom. You got songs like Prophecy, Conquest, Death, Four Horsemen, the title track, Future of Mankind. It's a perfect balance of everything you want from a concept album, especially from Judas Priest, who after the Angel Retribution, how could they get much bigger than do a concept album, a double album to be in fact, actually. This was the last album that a.k.a. Downing was a part of before he exited the band. Which I understand, but like I said, this album is one of my top 5 favorite Priest albums of all time.
Hannah.
My number 5 is Ahab, the Call of the Wretched Sea.
Honorable mention?
I mean, the other album to talk about, Moby Dick, in contrast to Leviathan. I mean, I simply prefer this doom metal, this funeral doom metal adaptation more than what Mastodon did. I mean, it follows Captain Ahab on his hunt for Moby Dick, and I mean, it's slow, it's pounding, it's deep, it's heavy, but it also has its quiet moments, and it's very dramatic in my opinion, and I really like it. I mean, I could have easily chosen other albums by Ahab, like The Boats of the Glen Carrick, which was also a book adaptation by William Hodgson, but then again, I simply prefer The Call of the Wretched Sea.
You're number 4, Hannah.
Dream Theater, Metropolis 2, what else is there to say? I mean, I'm not the biggest prog metal fan, but I would always prefer Images and Words over Metropolis 2, but I think the concept is awesome, and how cinematic this album actually is, and that's why it's on number 4.
My number 4, Artur spoiled it. It's Still Life. I mean, I could have went with My Arms Are Hers simply because of the idea behind it, with having the title of the next song be the final lyric of the previous song and the story behind it. And plus, Demon of the Fall, one of Opeth's best songs that signaled the change that was to come starting with this. But I went with Still Life because it's, in my opinion, the better album, and top 2, top 3 Opeth album for me, along with Blackwater Park and Ghost Reveries. I mean, the way it starts, the first couple of minutes, it's like, starts off with this, like, guitar wailing thing, and then it gets into this, like, beautiful, relaxing acoustic part before it just goes full-on metal. And, of course, Michael's growls started to get deeper by this point, whereas before, he was kind of on that middle ground between a death metal growl and the black metal vocals on the 3 albums previous. Here, his growls are full-on low, signaling, and could tell you why he was in Bloodbath for a while, because he's got quite a snarl to him, but the clean vocals shine through so much on this album. And of course, as Artur pointed out, this was the transition from being more closer to death metal than to prog, to more actually combining the two properly into their music. Whereas the way they were doing it prior, it was progressive, but more in the sense of how it was put together. Here, it still carries that, but also in the progressive songs on this album carry on what prog rock was all about, with experimentation with acoustic guitars and even other unconventional instruments at times. But I mean, from the More all the way through to the end with White Cluster, it's a masterpiece. I love Face of Melinda, Serenity, Painted Death, Godhead's Lament, yeah, Moonlapse Vertigo, Benighted. I mean, I could go on and on about it, and I'll just shut up right now. Ricky, you're number 4.
It's been spoiled. Iron Maiden, 7th son of a 7th son. Enough said, Hannah said it perfectly about it. Based on the book, I think it was a book, 7th son of a 7th son, about this 7th son of a 7th having godlike powers and, you know, the mystique about it. And like I said, very ballsy at the time that Iron Maiden did a concept album back in 1986. You got classic songs like The Evil Dead Man 2, Title Track, Fluid Madness, Moonchild. I mean, it's a great album. Probably like my top 4 Iron Maiden best album.
My personal favorite. Artur, you're number 4.
My number 4 possibly is my most left field choice of them all, just like Hannah had a couple of that I didn't know. But it's Moonspell 1755. I mean, you know me. I'm a big mark for Moonspell. And not only this being their first album fully sang in Portuguese, but also being a concept album talking about what is regarded here in Portugal as one of the darkest events in all of its history, the Great Earthquake of 1755. And just to give the shorter version, it was an earthquake. It happened on November 1st of that very same year, with the epicenter about 20 kilometers to the southwest of Portugal in the middle of the ocean. But the intensity of the earthquake was so strong that it destroyed all major cities in the country. No city was left unscathed, and it is said that the earthquake was felt all the way to Oslo in Norway. So, to talk about not only to sing in Portuguese, but to sing about an event that is mostly known in the country's history, and still managing to create one absolute beast of an album, it is a tremendous feature by itself. That's why maybe a bit most of my left field, but for those who know me, it's not that odd. 1755 by Moonspell.
Alright, did I get everybody's number 4?
Yep.
Alright, so Artur, time for the top 3. Number 3.
I'm going top 3 with possibly another a rock and roll concept album, Wasps, The Crimson Idol.
Son of a bitch! That's my number 3 too!
I mean, I did mention a bit that Wasp had its fair share of concept albums, such as the Neon God, such as Kill Fuck Die, Dying for the World, and even the Headless Children. But one could say that the best of concept albums that was made by Blackie Lawless and the boys was the Crimson Idol. I mean, the story about a boy who was considered a bit the black sheep of the family, and after his eldest brother's death, he runs away from home, becomes an addict, but then he spots a crimson guitar that he has the urge to become that very same idol after meeting Chainsaw Charlie, possibly one of the best songs of this very same album, and he signs with a major label to become the Crimson Idol. But after he becomes it, he tries to get in touch with its parents to the point that they say, "We don't have any son." They outcasted him for life, and so eventually, after the concert, which would become the last, he would hang himself. It would be the suicide of him. So that's the whole story, the short version of the Crimson Idol, and all the songs that they have there: Chainsaw Charlie, Mothers in the New Morning, Arena of Pleasure, Dr. Rocker, The Idol, and even the Great Misconceptions of Me, which talks about the death of this idol, Jonathan Steele, which is the longest song in almost 10 minutes, makes it really the Crimson Idol as a great Wasp. Not just a great Wasp album, but a great rock and concepts album, which is my number 3.
Well, my number 3 has been spoiled twice. It's Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. I mean, I've talked about this album in the past. It's maybe my favorite Maiden album, simply for how epic it is, and sort of signaling the change Iron Maiden was to become later in their career, starting with Brave New World, becoming a little more proggy. Maybe not a prog metal band, but on the border of the genre. But this was the beginning of that, and plus the Mellotron that they used, and they started, and synthesizers, they began experimenting with that with Somewhere in Time, but fully embraced here. And I know a lot of maybe diehard Maiden fans maybe looked at it as like, why did they do that? I love that they did that because it made the music more epic than Maiden was already prior. I mean, top to bottom, Moonchild 2, Only the Good Die Young.
The biggest problem that Maiden did before the conception of that album was, I think it was Bruce on an interview said that, you can't use synthesizers on Iron Maiden music and such. Then what it comes out, an album that uses a lot of synthesizers in Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. The problem with some fans is that they don't practice what they preach, so to say.
Ricky.
Well, Artur spoiled it. The Crimson Idol by Wasp. Probably the most darkest concept album I've ever heard in my life. One of the darkest. And I just like the idea that at the beginning this album originally was supposed to be a Blackie Lawless solo album. But the record company wanted another Wasp album, so he just put the Wasp label on it. And like Artur said, Chainsaw Charlie, Arena of Pleasure, is probably two of the best songs of that album. And also, he hanged himself with the same guitar strings that brought him the Crimson guitar, that brought him so much success, money, and fame, but yet he was so depressed. He kind of reminded me how Kurt Cobain was in a way. With all the success, all the money in the world, still didn't make him happy. And also Blackie Lawless, the intention of this album was to show the world.
From what I heard, the reason why Jonathan hanged himself was because He wanted to get back to his parents, but after talking with his parents, they said, "We don't have any son." They outcasted him for life. That's one of the reasons why he took him.
And Lawless created this album to show the fans that just because you're a rock star, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's a dark business. Some people can say it's even darker than the mafia or any big cartel. It's just as big and as dangerous as any other business in the world. It has its good sides and its bad sides. And Black and Lawless wanted to show the fans that the truth behind the music industry, which we know very well, is quite dark and sinister. And, I'm just going to shut up. It's a great album. Listen to it.
Henna.
My number 3 is Abigail by King Diamond. Sorry, Artur. Well, I mean, a lot of King Diamond albums could be here, but in my opinion, the best one is Abigail. And I mean, King Diamond, in my opinion, is synonymous with themes of horror. I mean, you can feel it, you can see it and experience it in his live shows. I mean, it's so tragic and theatrical in a way, and the way he incorporates all those horror elements. I mean, he has Abigail, he has the ghost, the character, and then the 4 horsemen, and then the couple in this gothic mansion who find the coffin of the deceased Abigail, and so on, and all how the story continues. And I mean, just the images he creates. I mean, there isn't a better horror film than any album King Diamond has ever created, and I think this album is awesome. I don't think I have to add more to it. Classic, absolute awesome, love it.
I just thought of a fucked up comparison. It's because I remember with the Abigail storyline about a ghost possessing Abigail, the ghost possessing the woman in the mansion. That reminds me, you know what? I'm going to wait till after the show because I don't want to get this video demonetized.
Okay. It reminds me kind of the Exorcist in a way, now that you mention it.
Alright, and now it's time for the top 2. Hannah, your number 2.
My number 2.
Who does number 2 work for? Me, that's who he works for. Anyways.
Anyway.
Well, my number 2 might be a bit uncontroversial, a bit of a weird choice. It's Sorny Night by Kawan. I've talked about this album, I don't know, too often. But I think this story about the Dyatlov Pass accident, and the way it works with the music Kawan creates is such a theatrical album. I don't speak a word Finnish, but I mean, what I get from listening to this album is enough for me to understand this story. And I mean, I've read a lot about it, and what they do in this album is just awesome. The way the music flows, and in combination with this weird poetic finish, it's just awesome. And I think when I think about concept albums, surprisingly, this is the album I was thinking about immediately. Might be a bit weird, but it works out for me, and I love it.
Ricky.
For the billionth time in this show, I'm bringing the hybrid album of all hybrid albums. a.k.a. The Mantle.
Again.
Again. We talk about The Mantle all the time. We have said everything in the rainbow about The Mantle. I mean, the Shadow of Pale Companion. What can you say about it? I'm just going to leave it that way.
My number 2 has been spoiled by somebody. I can't remember who. Pink Floyd, The Wall.
It was
Artur, I figured.
It was my honorable mentions.
I mean, enough said. Basically, a concept album on a boy basically trying to isolate himself from everyone by building a wall around him, and stories of war flashbacks, trying to heal through drugs, tyrannical teachers, hence why he had the songs Another Brick in the Wall and Comfortably Numb. And those are two classic songs from the 70s, so what more can you say about The Wall? Artur, you're number 2.
And, kind of spoiled my number 2. And as she said, power metal is very, very much centered on concept album. In a way, easily I could have put here both Keeper of the Seven Keys album. I could have put here Symphony of the Enchanted Lands by Rhapsody, both part 1 and part 2, but I'm not ashamed to say that I'm a Blind Guardian fan. Fifth best thing coming out of Germany after the thrash metal Big Four. So Nightfall in Middle Earth. I mean, I love this album. I love everything connected to Tolkien, whether it's Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, the unfinished chapters, Sons of Durin as well. And in a way, Blind Guardian has always been trying to put Tolkien in a bit into metal. And I think it was on Loudwire, a video by Loudwire or Metal Jackson, if I'm not mistaken, that interviewed both Hansi Kirsch and John Schaefer from Demons and Wizards and Iced Earth, say what books could be made into metal albums. Lord of the Rings was in their choice, and so you said some of the songs. Mirror Mirror, Nightfall is a daunting ballad. My personal favorite, Time Stands Still at the Iron Hill. Thorn is darksome and beautiful. The whole album that talks about the Silmarillion in several chapters, it is a masterpiece by itself. And my number 2 on the concept albums.
And while we're at it, it's time for your number 1, which... Yep.
No surprise there. It's Abby. Oh, Abigail. King Diamond, as I think it was Levi that said, one of the best vocalists of all time. His falsetto voice has often been imitated, but never duplicated. But if we say that, we have to also mention the voice of Rob Halford, the voice of Rob Halford, and many others that tried that falsetto. But the whole story behind King Diamond, as Razorfist said on his channel when he did the Metal Mythos on Abigail, on King Diamond, he said this could be transformed into a movie, into a horror movie. I mean, out of all the albums that King Diamond made, Fatal Portrait, Abby, them, and Conspiracy, all 4 of them could be a full-on hammer horror, not just book, but also movies as well. Jonathan LaFay, Miriam, Family Ghost, The Arrival. I mean, I still to this day love that intro from The Arrival. It means it feels like it's a bit of a wrestling theme. It means that something is coming and you're not going to like it. Especially that intro part. I wouldn't mind see Aleister Black coming out with King Diamond theme. That would be awesome. But Family Ghost, which eventually became the video, Possession, Abigail itself, the Black Horseman. I mean, as concepts go, we've had technology, we've had revolutions, we've had walls, we've even had we haven't had sergeants, but to me, nothing beats a good hammer horror story narrated by King Diamond himself. So I could, and as I said, I could have easily put here Abigail, Conspiracy, and them, but I'll just leave it with Abby.
Hannah.
I've got a tie on my number one because I just couldn't decide which album I would choose by Pink Floyd, and it's not The Wall. Surprisingly, because I can't stand. I mean, I love certain songs of the war, but I've never been a big fan of Roger Waters personally. I've always been more of a David Gilmour fan, and that's why I've got, first of all, The Dark Side of the Moon on my number one. Hello, Ricky. And I mean, for me, The Dark Side of the Moon, I've always, whenever I listen to it, it has to be the entire album. I very rarely listen to single songs of that album because I just think everything flows together so well, and the way it talks about mental illness, conflict, greed, time, death, and especially the later mental development of Sid Barrett before he was forced to leave Pink Floyd. I mean, the topics of this album are so dear to my heart, and it's very touching the way it talks about it, especially on songs like Us and Them, one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs. I simply love this album to death. And then the second one is Animals. In my opinion, also an awesome concept record. Talks about the social conditions of Great Britain in the 1970s. It's just such great. Now I'm missing the English word. It's just such a great record of its time. The way it talks about the predatory dogs. On the song Dogs, of course, in my opinion, one of David Gilmour's finest musical moments. Then you've got, it talks about the ruthless pigs, but also the mindless and unquestioning herds of sheep on the three main songs of this album. And it works together so well. And in my opinion, Pink Floyd have always been very critical of everything that's going on in politics and in society, and both albums, in my opinion, are great regarding that. I mean, The Wall is also a great album, but in my opinion, not as socially important as the Dark Side of the Moon and Animals.
Ricky.
Well, I brought up Rush being 2112 being the father of all father concept albums. My number one is also a tie. Also Pink Floyd. The mother of all mother albums. I have both Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall. I could have gone with Wish You Were Here. I could have gone with Animals. I could have gone with anything in the Sid Barrett era. But I went with both of the albums that me define what Pink Floyd is. On any given day, you ask me what's your favorite Pink Floyd album. It's the difference between Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall. Dark Side of the Moon for being this amazing album that, like Hannah said, it talks about mental illness, greed, love, even life. When the beat Speak to Me starts with a heartbeat and Eclipse ends with heartbeat being the cycle of life. And then you got The Wall, not only describing political views, but also Roger Waters' childhood growing up, being that his father was in World War II, died during World War II, and also the isolation by his mother, trying to keep him from the world, and also I'm losing my thoughts here. The other side of rock stardom, when, like I said, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. It's also very depressing. And if we were to do a top 10 Pink Floyd albums list, I can tell you this, the majority, whether it be Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall. Especially The Wall being that you got probably one of the most underrated songs, Hey You. One of the most chilling songs ever created. And then you got like Dark Side of the Moon. I can't decide which one. That's why I put them, both of them as my number.
And Ricky, before I give my number one, Mr. Sacco for you. My number one got spoiled on early on. 2112 by Rush. I mean, two sides of the same coin. The first half being the 20-minute 2112 movement, and then the second half of the album is mostly singles. But to kind of sum up the album's story, I'm going to read this quote from Anonymous 2112 in the liner notes. I lie awake staring out at the bleakness of Megadon City and sky become one, merging into a single plane, a vast sea of unbroken gray, the twin moons, just two pale orbs as they trace across the steely sky. I used to think I had a pretty good life here, just plugging into my machine for the day, then watching Temple Vision or reading a Temple paper in the evening. My friend John always said it was nicer here than under the atmospheric domes of the outer planets. We have had peace since 2062, when the surviving planets were banded together under the red star of the Solar Federation. The less fortunate gave us a few new moons. I believed what I was told. I thought it was a good life. I thought I was happy. And then I found something that changed it all. And, of course, probably Rush's best album in their entire discography during their golden age of the 70s and early 80s when they were just pumping out classic after classic. And this was the epicenter of all of that. You could argue one of the Godfather albums of prog metal because it's pretty heavy for the time in 76. So, without this album, would we have the other albums that followed after? Probably not. Without Rush, without Pink Floyd, and hell, without The Who. Because none of us brought up Tommy by The Who on our list.
Yeah.
But without those bands, you would not have albums like Seventh Son or Still Life or anything that followed. So 2112 deserves all the credit that it's gotten for nearly 40 years. Or actually nearly 50 years. And that does it for this episode of Top 10 Concept Albums, but we're just getting started. Next episode, episode 30, the long-awaited episode about Norwegian black metal, the bands, the stories, the murders, the church burnings, and maybe even the cornflakes, and maybe even a debate about Lords of Chaos. Finally.
Oh.
That's gonna be down dirty. Bloody.
Right up Anna's alley. Right up Anna's alley.
So, with that
let's
being,
get started with the movie.
That probably be like the very end.
I'll say it. I got 2 words for that movie. It's shit.
I agree.
Well, with that said, thank you guys for watching the premiere stream and kind of leaving your comments. We'll be back hopefully soon for episode 30. After that, no clue what the hell is going to happen. We're still discussing. Could be top 10 instrumentals, could be top 10 albums of the 2000s. Whatever we want to do. Thank you for watching. Horns high, and we'll see you soon. What? Oh, good lord! Holy fuck! Oh my god! Ah! No!
Quit trying.
You had the gun too!
Oh shoot, I forgot.
Oh,
You're my test, oh god.
Ow! Oh my goodness!
Holy.
Somebody
What
shot
just happened to Carson?
Somebody shot or
I face planted a freaking container.